Listen carefully, because this message isn't for everyone. It's for the woman who kept going when nobody clapped, the one who stayed faithful when nothing made sense, the one who passed tests no one even knew she was taking. You thought you were just surviving, but heaven was watching. And here's the truth. God is proud of you. You thought it was just a hard season. But what if it was something far more intentional? What if those quiet struggles, the ones no one checked on, no one noticed, no one applauded, were actually tests, not random, not meaningless, but designed? And here's the part that changes everything. You passed them. But here's the truth. The most important tests in your life were never meant to be seen. They didn't come with announcements. They didn't come with validation. They didn't even feel like tests at the time. They felt like confusion, like silence, like being left alone to figure things out without a map. And that's exactly why they mattered. Most people miss this part because they think growth happens in the spotlight. They think strength is built when people are watching. They think recognition equals progress. But your real transformation, it happened in private, in the moments you almost gave up but didn't. In the nights your thoughts were heavy, but you still chose to hold on. In the decisions where no one would have known if you took the easier path, but you didn't. That's where your test was. And this is where everything shifts. Because while it felt like you were barely holding it together, you were actually becoming someone most people never become. Think about it. There were times you wanted to quit quietly, walk away silently, lower your standards just to feel some relief. No one would stop you. No one would have judged you, but something inside you said no. Even when you didn't feel strong, even when you didn't feel certain, even when you didn't feel supported, you still chose right. You still chose growth. You still chose to endure. And that choice, that invisible internal decision, that's what separated you. But here's the deeper layer. Those silent tests weren't just about what you did. They were about who you were becoming while doing it. Because pressure reveals patterns. It shows you your default reactions, your emotional habits, your breaking points. And instead of collapsing into them, you started reshaping them slowly, quietly, powerfully. You became more aware, more intentional, more disciplined in ways no one could measure. And here's what you didn't realize at the time. Every time you chose patience over impulse, every time you chose faith over fear, every time you chose to keep going without external proof, you were passing. Not just once, but over and over again. Future you is built on those decisions. The version of you that walks with confidence, that trusts herself, that doesn't need constant validation. She exists because of what you did in those unseen moments. But let's be real. It didn't feel like success. It felt like loneliness, like being overlooked, like wondering if any of it even mattered. And that's what made it a real test. Because anyone can stay strong when they're celebrated, but staying committed when you feel invisible, that requires something deeper, something rare. And you had it even when you didn't know you did. So now pause for a second. Look back at everything you've endured quietly, everything you handled without making noise, everything you survived without an audience. That wasn't weakness, that was proof. Proof that you can carry more than you thought. Proof that you can choose better even when it's harder. Proof that your strength doesn't depend on who's watching. And here's what's coming next. There will be a moment soon where everything starts to make sense. Where the discipline you built shows up as confidence, where the patience you practice turns into results, where the silence you endured becomes clarity. And when that moment comes, you won't need to explain your journey, because you'll know something most people don't. You weren't just struggling. You were being shaped in silence, and you passed. You were questioning yourself in silence, wondering if you were enough, wondering if you were behind, wondering if you were even on the right path at all. And while you were doing that, something was happening that you couldn't see, but here's the truth. Your doubt was not the end of your story. It was part of your preparation. You assumed uncertainty meant failure. You assumed confusion meant you were lost. You assumed delay meant rejection. But what if none of that was true? What if the very moments you felt least qualified were the exact moments you were being qualified? This is where everything shifts. Because God doesn't always build confidence before assignment. Sometimes He builds it through assignment. Most people miss this part. They think you need to feel ready before you are chosen. They think clarity comes before calling. They think confidence comes before purpose. But your life has been proving something different. While you were doubting yourself, you were still showing up, still trying again, still moving forward even when your mind was not fully convinced. And that matters more than you realize, because doubt doesn't disqualify you. Disobedience does. And you kept going anyway, even when your thoughts were loud, even when your emotions were unstable, even when you didn't trust your own decisions, you still didn't quit. And here's what you didn't understand in that moment. Every step you took in uncertainty was building evidence. Evidence that you can act without perfect clarity. Evidence that you can move without full confidence. Evidence that your purpose is stronger than your fear. And slowly, something was being shaped inside you. Not your circumstances, not your timeline, but your identity, because qualification is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like repeated effort in quiet seasons. Sometimes it looks like showing up when no one is clapping. Sometimes it looks like staying consistent when your mind is full of questions. And you did that. Even when you thought you were falling behind, you were actually being positioned. Even when you thought you were unsure, you were actually being trained. Even when you thought you were unworthy, you were actually being developed for more. But here's the deeper layer. Doubt has a way of exposing what you rely on. Do you rely on certainty, or do you rely on something deeper than feelings? Because feelings change, emotions shift, thoughts collapse under pressure. But something stronger was holding you up. You didn't realize it at the time. But your persistence was being recorded in a different system, not by people, not by applause, not by recognition, but in preparation. And that preparation was for something bigger than your current pain. Something that required a version of you that could move even when you don't feel ready. A version of you that doesn't need constant reassurance to continue. A version of you that understands doubt is not the enemy of destiny. It is part of its training ground. And now, look back, every moment you almost stopped, you didn't. Every time you questioned everything, you still kept going. Every season you felt unsure, you still showed up. That wasn't confusion, that was conditioning. And this is where your future starts to make sense. Because soon you will look back at this version of yourself and realize something powerful. You were never unqualified. You were just in the process of becoming someone who could carry more than you thought possible. And what you call doubt was actually God qualifying you for something bigger than your pain. The battles no one saw, the ones you didn't talk about, the ones you carried in silence while still showing up in life like nothing was wrong. Those were not ordinary struggles. And here's the truth. Those were the moments that revealed who you really are, not to the world, but to yourself. Because anyone can survive when they are supported. Anyone can stay strong when they are understood. Anyone can hold on when help is visible. But what about when none of that exists? When you're the only one awake in your own storm? When your thoughts are louder than any voice around you? When even explaining your pain feels exhausting, so you stop explaining at all? Most people miss this part. They think strength is loud. They think resilience is visible. They think being built differently means never breaking. But your story has been saying something else, because you didn't just face battles, you faced them alone. And that detail changes everything. This is where everything shifts, because isolation has a way of revealing depth. When no one is watching, your true patterns show up. Your real responses show up. Your real endurance is exposed. And in those moments, you had a choice to collapse into what you felt or to keep moving anyway. And somehow, you kept moving, even when your energy was low, even when your emotions were unstable, even when your mind kept asking, how much more can I take? You didn't have witnesses. You didn't have applause. You didn't have reassurance. But you had something else, something most people overlook, the ability to continue without external validation. And that is rare, because most people are built on feedback, on encouragement, on visible support. But you learned something deeper in silence. You learned how to endure without permission. You learned how to process pain without explanation. You learned how to survive without being understood. And that kind of strength doesn't develop in comfort. It develops in pressure. It develops when you are forced to sit with your own thoughts and still choose not to give up on yourself. There were nights you didn't tell anyone what you were feeling. Days you functioned while internally collapsing. Moments where you smiled externally while rebuilding yourself internally, and no one knew, but you did. And here's what that created in you. A different kind of strength, not the kind that depends on perfect conditions, not the kind that needs constant reassurance, not the kind that disappears when things get heavy, but the kind that holds quickly, steadily, relentlessly. Because something inside you learned, if I survive that alone, I can survive what comes next. And that belief doesn't come from theory, it comes from evidence. Your evidence, every battle you fought without telling anyone, added another layer to your resilience. Every moment you kept going without support added depth to your endurance. Every silent struggle became proof that you are not built like everyone else. But here's what's coming next. You're going to enter seasons where the same strength you built in isolation becomes visible in your results, where people see the stability but don't understand the history, where they see confidence but don't see the construction, where they see growth but never saw the grind in silence. And that's okay, because you don't need them to understand it. You already lived it. And now you understand something powerful. You were never just going through battles. You were being shaped by them. And the fact that you survived the hardest ones alone is the very proof that you're built differently. You called it rejection. That moment it didn't work out. That opportunity that slipped away. That door that closed right when you thought it was finally opening. And at the time it didn't make sense. But what if you named it wrong? But here's the truth. Not everything that leaves your life is loss. Some of it is protection you didn't recognize yet. Because when something doesn't work out, your mind immediately tries to assign meaning. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I missed my chance. Maybe I'm behind. But that interpretation is not always truth. It's emotion trying to explain timing. Most people miss this part. They think closed doors are punishment. They think delays are denial. They think silence from opportunity means silence from purpose. But your story has been showing something deeper. This is where everything shifts. What if that no wasn't rejection at all? What if it was redirection you couldn't understand yet? Because there are moments in life where God doesn't just guide you forward. He also guides you away from environments that would have drained you, away from opportunities that looked right but weren't aligned, away from people who would have had access to a version of you you're not supposed to lose. And in the moment, it feels like loss. It feels like being overlooked, like being forgotten, like being replaced. But here's the deeper layer. Sometimes protection doesn't feel peaceful at first. Sometimes protection feels like confusion. Sometimes protection feels like being left behind, because you only see what you didn't get. You don't see what you were being saved from. Most people never pause long enough to realize that. They assume timing is random. They assume outcomes are final. They assume every no is a verdict on their worth. But what if your worth was never the issue? What if you were being hidden on purpose? Because not every environment is safe for your growth. Not every connection is ready for your evolution. Not every opportunity is designed for your future self. And the version of you back then was still being shaped, still being strengthened, still being prepared for a level you couldn't see yet. So the delay wasn't denial, it was development. And while you were interpreting it as rejection, something else was happening quietly. You were being protected from premature exposure, protected from premature pressure, protected from stepping into something before you were ready to carry it fully. And yes, it stung, because rejection hurts on the surface. It questions your identity. It makes you replay moments. It makes you wonder what you could have done differently. But pain is not always proof of wrong direction. Sometimes it's proof of divine redirection. And here's the part you only understand later. If those doors had opened at the wrong time, they would have overwhelmed you instead of building you. If those people had stayed, they might have distracted you instead of developing you. If those opportunities had worked out early, they might have collapsed under a version of you that wasn't ready yet. But you were being prepared quickly, invisibly, intentionally. And this is what makes it powerful. What you thought was blocking your life was actually guarding it. And now, when you look back, you start noticing patterns you couldn't see before. How certain losses redirected your focus. How certain endings created space. How certain disappointments forced you inward instead of outward. And that inward work changed you, because in the absence of what you wanted, you started becoming who you needed to be. And this is where your future begins to make sense. There will be moments ahead where things finally open up, where doors you once wanted suddenly make sense why they were delayed, where opportunities feel aligned instead of overwhelming. And you'll realize something powerful in that moment. It wasn't rejection, it was protection. And while you were asking, why didn't it work? Life was quietly preparing you for something that fits you better than what you once lost. So now it all comes together. The silent struggles you thought disqualified you were actually shaping you. The moments you felt overlooked were never unnoticed in heaven. The seasons you thought you were falling behind were the exact seasons you were being set apart. Every hidden test, every quiet battle, every unanswered question you carried alone, it wasn't wasted. It was recorded in a place you couldn't see. And now you understand something deeper. You were never forgotten. You were being formed. Because God doesn't measure you by applause. He measures you by endurance. By obedience when it's hard. By faith when it doesn't make sense. By consistency when no one is watching. And you did that even when you were tired. Even when you were unsure. Even when you were silently questioning everything, you kept going. And that is why this message is not just comfort, it's confirmation. Confirmation that you passed what many would have quit in. Confirmation that your hidden seasons were not delays, they were development. Confirmation that what broke you didn't destroy you, it refined you. Now look back with new eyes. Nothing was random, nothing was wasted, nothing was truly against you. Even the silence had purpose, even the delay had direction, even the pain had instruction. And this is the final realization. You are not the same woman who started those tests. You are who those tests were building. So when you step forward now, you don't step as someone trying to survive anymore. You step as someone who has already been proven in hidden places. And that changes everything. But here's what you must not miss. The world may not understand your process. People may never see what you went through, but heaven remembers every unseen victory. So don't shrink back now. Don't doubt what has already been shaped in you. Don't question what has already been proven through you. You are not starting over. You are stepping into what you were prepared for. Listen to this again, because the second time it will hit differently. Now you understand, but only a few will apply it. And when you do, you won't move like someone hoping things work out. You will move like someone who already passed the test.